Hi, it is our last session on qualitative data analysis. So in this lecture, I am going to talk about second stage coding and then also strategies and methods to get to your categories and themes and different approaches to do that, and then also representing your data. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then you are going to read from Saldana, his approach to theming, and then Gerbich, it's such a great chapter to show the different ways that you can represent your findings. And then we are going to apply everything that you've learned about data analysis to something related to your study. So I just wanted to mention a couple things to build on what we've been talking about for the past couple of lectures and the past two perusals. So one thing is to think about is your terminology when you are talking about data analysis. It might be data analysis, data interpretation, data description. So go back to our text for the class that we read in chapter 8 and make sure that whatever approach that you are using, whatever terminology you're using, aligns with your overall epistemology, your conceptual framework, your theoretical framework. So are you interpreting the data or are you analyzing the data and thinking about the different dimensions of what that might mean? So I wanted to make a note. I should have put this part in the last lecture and put the example of the published article here, but that's okay. So I wanted to mention, I know that all of the readings have talked about using software to manage your data. You might have seen this in the last lecture, but I do have an optional lecture that you can watch about using in vivo. So this is in perusal. This is in the data analysis approaches by genre. It's this optional in vivo lecture. So in this lecture, I show you a few examples. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing, TikTok's misspelled. Okay, I show you a few examples of how to use in vivo, how to code. You can see here the codes, the nodes. So if you are interested in how to use this software, or if you just want to see some more examples about how to analyze data, I think in this lecture, I talked a little bit about my dissertation and then also a project that I did where I analyzed some Twitter data. So you can take a look at that. Again, it's optional. And that is in the previous assignment. And I'll also put a link to that video too here if you wanted to check that out. So that is a reminder about using software to analyze data, which I enjoy, but that's not the only way to do it. But as you start to move towards analyzing your data, you can think about that. So again, be careful of your terminology. Again, not everyone uses coding, not everyone has to. Codes are not the same as themes. Categories are usually not the same as themes either. So being cognizant of that. And then I did give you a reminder of in vivo. There's also Atlas TI. And then I've tried like some web-based ones, like this one called Deduce. I really wanted it to work out for me, but in vivo, and I talk about this in lecture too, how to get it from Georgia State. So, okay, so to just wrap us up here. So once you have done your first round coding, then you need to take those codes and you go through another iterative process or 2 or 3 or 4. So just like there's many different approaches to first round coding or first round analysis, there's also many different methods and approaches to secondary analysis. So one of those is code mapping, where you would organize the codes into categories. You could do this visually in like a concept map. So let's take a look here. So this is an example where you can see you have the codes, the first round codes here and how they're categorized. So you have your categories and then you put the codes that go with them. And then from there, you can see it's even more descriptive. This is what it looked like the second round, subcategories. And then from going from 3 to even more the dichotomies here, the concepts phrased in versus terms. So this is like with versus coding. So they had the recategorizing here, so you can just see some different ways to do this. And again, this is on page 221. So when you read the Saldana chapter in the next section, you will see he gives a description of the different process, but this is just so you can see a little bit about what that looks like. So here you can see another approach, code charting, which is also in the section you're about to read with Saldana, page 229, organizing by case. You can see they have the participant, a summary, and then the codes that went with that particular participant. So you can think about this one makes sense, perhaps if you're doing a narrative analysis or if you're going by lesson. So yeah, different approaches based on your research questions, your research goals, and the type of data you're collecting. Another second one is your pattern coding, where you have your meta codes. So with pattern coding, these are your first round codes, and then you group those together and you come up with a pattern code to describe all of them. Then you have your theoretical coding here. Here's an example of that you will read about. And so here you can also see, this is from the Gerbich book, about memoing. So just again, coming back to memoing, which I know that you're well versed on now, and hopefully you are becoming attached to the process and doing a little bit every day and seeing how it can transform your writing and your thinking. So here you can see, as part of the analytic process, the interview transcript, and then the memo right here next to it. And once you kind of get a chance to read in here, you can see the researcher is making connections to their conceptual framework, their literature review, their theoretical framework, really powerful. And you can include a little segment like this in your dissertation. This is a great way to show your process. In your comps, you can show this as an example of what you did. If you read thematic analysis, you will see, you would have read this one here. To see how that came up, if you're interested, you can go back to the last example that we read in the last lesson. Okay, so I wanted to show you another example. This one is from my dissertation. So I showed you the STEM one last time. This one is a different method. So this one is a critical discourse study that analyzed documents and interviews. So here you can see phases of data analysis. In today's memo, I'm going to ask you to do something similar. So throughout the past several lectures, we've learned that data analysis is not just one thing. You need to have a method for each. So you might have maybe your first stage is case files. Your second one is a first round coding, and then you have a second round coding and your theming. So here you can see the steps, what I did first, second, third, and fourth. The purpose of that, you can see the sites that I put in there, and then guiding perspectives, again, the sites. That's something too that once you start today's memo, I say, if you have them, drop your sites, and you might have a couple choices. You might say, okay, for first round coding, right now I'm thinking of either doing process coding or content coding. And then so you could put the page numbers for each and then talk a little bit about why you're thinking about that. So again, this is for discourse, so yours will be slightly different, but that's an example of a table that you can, again, this is straight from my dissertation, I believe, or somewhere along the way. Okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is a good example. So this is what I mentioned, like I probably should have put this in the STEM paper, but in a dissertation, I think that this is super effective to make visible your analytic process. So here you can see I have my content categories and then offspring codes. So, and I probably showed this a little bit in that in vivo lecture too, talking about from the content category and then the codes that went with that, and then coming up with an even larger pattern code to go with that, just to help me simplify and organize and group and discuss when that came together. So this would be something that you would do after you've already collected the data and analyzed it. But this could be a way for you to show that, and even a strategy that you could use as you group them together. So here you can also see, and this is something that we did when we did our data collection. We had our research question and then the data source that was going to address that question. So you might even have different analytic approaches that answer each research question. Maybe one of your research questions is addressed using the document analysis, and you're going to use content analysis for that. And then the other one is using interviews, and you're going to use a series of codes to help you do that. So you can also organize it with your research question here. So when we talked about organizing your data is one of the preliminary data analysis techniques. You can also map that onto your research question. So here you can see, based on the research question, I only analyzed a particular segment of text. Again, this is coming back to that theme of data reduction and how every phase of the analytic process, you're reducing the data to really get at that question that you want to know. Okay. Again, this is critical discourse analysis, which is not something that we've gone into in this class. So if it looks a little different, don't be alarmed. Okay, and so after, so I showed you those examples. Now, after going through that analytic process based on the research questions, the content codes, the offsprings, all of that, these are the themes and sub-themes that represented my findings. And for this, I also used an analytic technique called metaphor analysis. So as you can see, I have this metaphor of the odds, and using that metaphor to categorize and discuss and classify the 6 different themes that I discussed. So I have the themes and then the sub-themes that came through those that I discussed in the dissertation. I mean, yeah, I don't think you need that, but I'm not sure. I think this link takes you to perhaps the presentation slides that I used during the defense. And then I'm not sure. Okay, so thematic analysis. So I know that some people have read through that already. I wanted to show you, not everyone read this chapter, show you just an example of what that analytic strategy can look like, then conceptual mapping, and then segmentation. So this is what block and file would look like. And again, this is block and file is a secondary data analysis technique, or third or fourth, depending on how many different phases and stages you are going to have. So here you can see the categories or themes, and then they took a segment of text and pasted under. So in case you didn't read that part, the argument not against codes, but the reason why some qualitative researchers use a different approach is because they feel that codes overly segment the data And based on their research question and their where they are, their entire conceptual framework, they find it more helpful for their research question to look at larger chunks of the data. So as you can see here, they took a large like paragraph and filed it underneath that instead of taking just a line. When you do the line by line coding, when you sort, if you look at the in vivo lecture, you'll see what I mean. When you sort for that code, it's just going to be a smaller segment. You can still get the bigger segment, but this block and file can be a way for you to look at it this way. And not just to what is most reflective of your qualitative approach. It's also, you're the research instrument. It's the way that helps you make sense of the data and interpret it in a way that fits within the conceptual framework that you've designed. So this is what block and file would look like. Conceptual mapping. This is, you can see here, these are the first round codes, maybe second round, and then how they are grouped together to make like a pattern code or a larger category that represents those codes. I don't know if this was intentional, but too, you could play around with colors, shapes, weights, and in some of the readings today, you will see some like word clouds and just different visual representations to help you indicate the relationship between the codes that you're finding, relationship between the ideas that came up in the data. Okay, and then here is segmentation. So you can see they have their category or theme, and then they have together different segments. So you can see these are short, just a couple words. This could be from in vivo codes. And this could be, I could see this being helpful if you were looking for something like beliefs. So if you had your beliefs or your philosophies here, and then you have just the short in vivo codes or descriptive codes that would go with that, you can look at all of this together and get a sense, or maybe even phenomenology. You can get a sense of what the essence or what characterizes that attitude, belief, philosophy element within the data that you collected. So I see how this could be helpful. I've never used this one, but I like it. Okay, so okay. Okay. So okay, so I want you to go read. So I want you to go read. Let's take a look. I'll show you what you're reading today. So you are going to be here. So this is perusal 7, second and final stages and application. So you'll be watching this lecture. Then this is the Saldana chapter 5, second cycle coding methods. Many of the things that I just discussed, but he goes into greater detail, not that long. Now here is a chance for you to practice. So here you are going to have some data. Okay, so you have the codes here. And up here is a description of the study, former students' perceptions of teachers. And so I want you to use a second stage analysis code or coding technique from Saldana. How would you collapse these codes? How would you make sense of them? You can work with someone if you want to work on this together. That's totally fine. But this is just a way for you to actually get some practice going from first round code to categories or themes. So yeah, here is the list here. You can, of course, make a Word document or a Google document and attach that to show us how you would apply second round coding to these. And then the last reading is 2 chapters from Gerbich. It is chapter 3 and chapter 24. So chapter 23 is theorizing the data. So this is how you're getting to theories and how you might talk about that. You know, they have grounded theory, phenomenology, content analysis. And then the last one is writing up your data. How are you going to represent it? And so I love this chapter. So all these different ideas, examples, so creative. And of course, you know, you won't know until you get the data, but I think that reading this will help you kind of put everything together about what data analysis means and why we do it, and what you come up with. So I want you to go ahead and do the readings, do your little mini practice. Again, if you want to work with someone to do this code list, you can do that. Now, after you have finished that, we are going to do our memo. So for this memo, let me move it over. I'm sorry. Okay, so for this memo, this number is wrong. For this memo, you are going to outline where you are with data analysis. I know we did our initial when you read chapter 8. I'm guessing that after these readings, you already have some edits to what you thought you were going to do. So you are going to outline your proposed data analysis procedures and any relevant citations that you have. And then you are going to model how you might use it. So here is a template, Memo 9.0, Perusal 7, Updated Data Analysis Plan. So based on your readings, what's your current thinking about your overall approach? Are you going to be using coding? Are you going to be using thematic analysis? Are you going to be, you know, what is your approach going to be? So think about that, and then you can list any sites or page numbers. This is going to be so helpful for you once you are finalizing your chapter 3, once you are getting those sites in, and then once you are actually analyzing your data, you can come back here to remind yourself of some ideas to help you make that plan. Here's where you can do your stages and phases. Again, if you're not sure, that's okay. Just this is your chance to try something. You know, first round, maybe you say, you know, organizing, I'm thinking of organizing it by day. I'm thinking about organizing it by person. Then maybe your first round, I'm thinking about these two different types of coding. Second round, these two things interest me. Data display, I'm thinking about this. Reflections, questions, next steps. I would love to hear how your understanding of data interpretation has shifted, and then what you still need to know. Now, next is the artifact. I made a Google Doc with your name, and you can find your slide and upload an artifact that represents your study. And this is where you can practice how you might analyze it. So this is just anything relevant to your study. Could be a photograph, could be a policy, could be, you know, an image of some sorts. So here is what I would do, like for my dissertation. This is like a little newspaper clipping, something like that. So on the memo, when you click here, it will take you to the artifact page. You'll insert a photo of your artifact or copy and paste if it's text, and then your analysis. So you could put your artifact here and then your analysis here, and then you can see everybody's. So that is what we are doing, and this is wrapping up data analysis. And I can't wait to see all of your artifacts and how you applied second round coding to the example in the perusal, the perceptions of teachers. Bye.